So we have a, a final talk in the morning session. So if I can ask you to please get your bagel or your coffee or whatever. And I'm so thrilled at all this conversation, but there's another nice interval for more of it. I guess for the first time in my life, I'm a bit of a buzzkill and I hate doing it. But okay, so a sort of a brief reminder about something, which is that after lunch, um, after lunch is going to be the frame session. And in that session, there are 3 discussions as well as a conversation. One is going to look at Cassatt, and it's amazing. Second one at Prendergast. Third one, a contemporary artist speaking about her own integration of frame and artwork called Stephanie Tema here. And then Suzanne Smeaton will moderate a conversation. And we are passionate about frames, and this is going to be great. So, but I wanted to break out, and particularly given the fact that Cassatt came up in the prior session as a sort of point of contrast in the discussion. So, I'm not sure whose line it was, and now for something completely different, but it's useful here. Now, there is at the Philadelphia Museum an exhibition that opened, I think it was April 12th, and it's called Boom. And it is drawn from the collections, and it is a cross-media exploration. That's all I'm going to say, but I'm just giving you the context for how it opens yet another facet of what we've been talking about this morning, or it chronicles another facet, I should say, whatever. And we are absolutely delighted that one of the curators who worked on this, the team effort, Elisabeth Agro, is here. And what she's going to speak about today is the American way, displacement in the work of George Nakashima and Isamu Noguchi. And there is a nice bio, and there is a little précis and some suggestions for reading, but really fantastic show. It's up right now. We're so excited to be able to have her share this with you.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for that warm welcome, and it's really a pleasure to be here, and it's quite an honor. I would say, as a young curator, or even a young administrative assistant at the Met, having attended these conferences sort of as a curatorial kid, I never thought I'd be able to be up on this stage. So thank you for letting me check off a bucket list item. So I stand in between you and lunch, which is always a difficult position. So I am going to speak very slowly, at least try to, because I know you're hungry. But I'm a food and other source. It's true. I am a delight. But I'm going to take questions. Rather than take questions up here, I will stay after. That way, if you're really needing lunch, you can run off and you're not held captive by me. So let's get started here, and I'm hoping I can do this well. Okay, so the American Way, displacement of the work of George Nakashima and Isamu Noguchi. So President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066 on February 19th, 1942, incarcerating Americans of Japanese ancestry in response to the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 3rd, 1941. Viewing them as threats to national security, the United States government instituted mass incarceration of over 122,000 people of Japanese descent, resulting in the loss of their property, businesses, and livelihoods. Detained in 10 sites in 7 states, Arkansas, Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming, 70,000 of these evacuees were American citizens. Their removal from the West Coast into American World War II internment camps fractured whole communities, which had a profound and lasting psychological impact on Japanese American internees over their lifetime. While interned and stripped of their freedom, art became a form of release for both George Nakashima and Isamu Noguchi, and a way to subversively investigate and assert their Japanese culture. Shortly after their respective releases from internment camps, Nakashima and Noguchi each created work that was a synthesis as they negotiated their identities during a period of intense hostility towards Japanese Americans in the 1940s. Though neither Nakashima nor Noguchi directly discussed issues of race and personal identity, their work after internment confronts their national identity and the hybridity of their contemporary experience. Although born an American citizen, George Nakashima was forcibly interned at Minidoka War Relocation Center in Idaho, along with 9,397 detainees. While interned, Nakashima apprenticed himself to Jintaro Hikagawa, a master carpenter who taught him a reverence for trees and imparted his techniques using Japanese hand tools and traditional methods of joinery. Nakashima was released in 1943 with the assistance of the Quaker-founded American Friends Service Committee, headquartered in Philadelphia, and resettled in New Hope, Pennsylvania, sponsored by the architect Antoine Raymond. There, he turned to woodworking as a profession, merging American forms of furniture with traditional Japanese craftsmanship in his exploration of form, material, and identity. In a letter of introduction dated February 15, 1944, to Renee Darnincourt, then director of the Department of Manual Industries at the Museum of Modern Art, the artist wrote, quote, "For the past 3 years, I've been engaged in the design and the construction hang on. Jump to page. Of furniture, sorry about that. I feel that there is a place for a better correlation of good sound wood design and modern requirements. In a way, too, a synthesis between the fine tradition of East Asiatic workmanship and modern American taste," end quote. In the spring of 1944, Darnincourt and Nakashima settled on a design for a coffee table, which is on your screen, which was placed in his office at MoMA. Nakashima explained to Darnincourt that his use of a fence at one end of the table, due to the walnut plank's tendency to warp, quote, "to take care of the shrinkage of any," end quote, and the heavier splayed legs as avoiding a, quote, "spindly quality," end quote, to support his selection of a heavier tabletop. He also concedes that this functional detail is, quote, "decorative at the same time," end quote. The table is a significant example of the first phase of Nakashima's practice, which was primarily client-driven, custom work, and it aided him to establish important connections to successfully launch his career. So I just want to add here that this table came to us through the estate of Joe Rischel, that was Anne Darnincourt's husband, and it descended in the family through Anne to Joe and then to us. It was offered to us in lockdown, and Joe had died just before the pandemic. And when we went to see, the executor insisted this is a Nakashima table, and I have to be honest with you, it's not signed, and it looks so far from what we know of Nakashima. It looks like a standard mid-century table in the like of Nakashima. But I did my due diligence and brought in someone, Bobby Bowell from Modern Gallery, and he was like, "I don't think that's Nakashima either. I don't know what to tell you." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's just do a little more digging." And he said, "Have you looked at the correspondence between Renee and Nakashima?" And lo and behold, in the first series of letters, there is this correspondence I'm quoting to you today. This is sort of the holy grail. This is the first earliest documented piece of Nakashima furniture The family did not know it was out there. It was just mentioned in this correspondence. No one knew where that table went, and it's really it really teaches us as curators and as professionals that it really deserves the digging. Otherwise, you're not going to find these sorts of things. And I'll continue. Grass-seated chair, an exceptional and revered form that is made of solid walnut, evolved from versions made in 1934, 39, and 41. So this is the chair illustrated on your right. Designed in 1944 and made in 1946 for Darnencourt, this example, the first of its kind, is the embodiment of Nakashima's determination to make furniture that was an amalgam of East Asian workmanship and that modern taste he talks about. In contrast, on your left, the straight-back chair, designed the same year, was also made of walnut, and a steam-bent-shaped top rail with a poplar seat is the earliest example of his standardized seating designs. Selected and purchased by Darnencourt in the same period, straight-back chair appeared in Nakashima's first catalog dated in 1945 as example E. It demonstrates his early experimentation with creating modern seating inspired by traditional American vernacular forms, in this case, the 18th century Windsor chair. These early examples of Nakashima's work, coffee table, grass-seated chair, and the straight-back chair, mirror a tension within his work that points to race and identity. Nakashima declared that he was, quote, a citizen of the world, end quote, and transcended national or racial boundaries. Yet he dared to embrace a Japanese aesthetic directly after experiencing deep injustice and discrimination because of his race and ethnicity. He also celebrated the spirit of centuries-old American vernacular furniture, incorporating their designs into his work. Although he claimed that the wounds of his internment experience had, quote, healed over and had left no scars, end quote, his combination of American and Japanese aesthetics reflects the construction of his own national identity, which, like his furniture, was a synthesis, not American, not Japanese, but a new identity, that of coalescence, and this became the singular principle of his work. Isamu Noguchi was living in California when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. His instinct was to reach out to other Nisei, second-generation Japanese Americans, and the Japanese American Citizen League to see if he could help support others of Japanese descent in some way. In response to Executive Order 9066, Noguchi organized the Nisei Artists and Writers Mobilization for Democracy, a group based in San Francisco. They developed an arts and crafts program that would be implemented at the 10 camps located throughout the Western Coast states. On May 12, 1942, he voluntarily entered the Colorado River Relocation Center near Poston, Arizona, to set up and oversee the farm and craft program for those incarcerated. Poston would eventually house almost over 20,000 internees. As the program launched, it was evident to Noguchi that it would not succeed. He made subsequent requests to be permitted to leave Poston, and they were denied. In Noguchi's own words from his I Became a Nisei essay, written in 1942 from Poston, quote, when people ask me why a Eurasian sculpture from New York have come so far into the Arizona desert to be locked up with the evacuated Japanese from the West Coast, I sometimes wonder myself. I reply that because of my peculiar background, I felt this war very keenly and wished to serve the cause of democracy in the very best way that seemed open to me. At other times, I say that I felt sympathy for the plight of the American-born Japanese, the Nisei, or else that relocation offered a presage of inevitable social change in which I wished to take part. All of this is true, but I might also have said that a haunting sense of unreality, of not quite belonging, which has always bothered me, made me seek for an answer among the Nisei, end quote. Finally, a temporary pass was granted to the artist, and he arrived home in New York on November 11th, 1942. In 1945, the War Relocation Authority issued another order for him to be reinterned, this time in Mazinar in California. He staved off this order for evacuation and internment with the help of a lawyer from the American Civil Liberties Union. and in 1945, he received authorization to stay in New York. Noguchi's sculptural work shifted as his awareness of the color line became heightened due to his internment experience. Koros, seen here on screen, was completed in 1945, shortly after his incarcerated and repeated appeals by the Western Defense Command to reincarcerate him. In the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, this sculpture is created out of 8 separate interlocking pieces of pink Georgia marble and held together by 3 pins and stands about 9 feet tall. Koros was as much a feat of engineering as it was challenging the tradition of archaic Greek sculpture. Drawing on biomorphic forms and simplified figuration, this multi-component marble slabs, like ready-to-assemble furniture, permitted him to dismantle the entire sculpture in 2 minutes. This highlights Noguchi's politicizing his state of dislocation and displacement, a direct attack on the idealized male figure and that of universal humanity, as a direct result of Executive Order 9066 and the distrust of American citizens of Japanese descent. It's not lost on us that presenting the human figure as a carcass suggests a bleak point of view. Amy Lyford, in her 2009 article, Noguchi, Sculptural Abstraction and the Politics of Japanese American Internment, states that Koros' abstract form and ease of portability, quote, thematizes the heroic male nude as a movable effigy, end quote, mimicking Noguchi's own relocations in the 1930s and his early 1940s experience because of World War II and the internment that he endured. Anti-Japanese American sentiments did not cease with the end of World War II, nor did criticism of Noguchi's work, which commented on his blending of Eastern and Euro-American traditions in his sculptural program. And Lyford astutely comments that, quote, Koros reconsiders the degree to which the image of a stable universalizing male man could be relevant in the world where migration, dislocation, and exile had become models for 20th century's man's existence, end quote. She goes further to say that Noguchi's work, quote, questions the assumptions embedded in American culture about how identities might or might not be negotiated and positioned within the racialized cultural matrix of the United States after Pearl Harbor, end quote. Again, in Noguchi's own words from his 42 Poston essay, quote, to be hybrid anticipates the future. This is America, the nation of all nationalities. The race and cultural intermixture is the antithesis of all the tenet of the Axis powers. For us to fall into the fascist line of race bigotry is to defeat our unique personality and strength, end quote. Following Koros, Avatar, on your left from the collection of the Kröller-Müller Museum in the Netherlands, follows in this series of biomorphic interlocking slab sculptures. Made in 1947 and also made from Georgia marble, Avatar is the name after a Hindu concept referring to the incarnation of a divine being who appears on Earth. The bronze example on your right, found in the Philadelphia Museum of Art's collection, was cast in 1982 for an edition of 8. Comprised of 4 elements, is it all surprising that Noguchi selected the form of an ambiguous mythic figure that resists definitive characterization? Koros, Avatar, and his other series of interlocking sculptures require assembly and disassembly each time they are placed on and off view. Lyford asserts that in doing so, it reenacts the experience of the World War II Japanese-American dislocation and internment. These works are the embodiment of Noguchi's personal narrative, and by proxy, those 122,000 people of Japanese descent who were mass incarcerated. Noguchi addresses the tragic aftermath of war as a moral crisis and the issue of the very meaning of sculpture being in question in his article, Towards a Reintegration of the Arts, which was published in the College Art Journal in the autumn of 1949. He concludes with, quote, though artists are neglected at the moment, we will soon be in great demand to supply the poetic and artistic meaning of our existence, end quote. Nakashima and Noguchi's output gave form to the realities of Japanese American life during and after World War II. Their artwork is an illustration of catharsis in processing their experience to self-define and self-identify as Americans post-war, their need for assimilation, and more importantly, healing and existence. To restate the quote from Noguchi's 42 post in text, quote, "This is America, the nation of all nationalities," end quote. Nakashima and Noguchi's post-internment output can be read as boldly asserting their culture, a coalescence of their East and Euro-American identities, deliberately articulating hybridity of their identity. In doing so, despite such intense hostility towards Japanese Americans, confronted and clarified their assertion of identity. It's my pleasure to address this topic today, and I think it's also really wonderful to insert three-dimensionality into this conference by bringing forward furniture and sculpture. So it's my pleasure to have done that. And especially to talk about George Nakashima and Noguchi in a whole different way. The works that I presented in my presentation are on display right now in an exhibition currently on view that Lisa had mentioned, Boom, Art and Design of the 1940s. And I co-curated this exhibition with Jessica Todd Smith, Dilys Blum, Amanda Bach, and our collection's exhibition assistant, Lily Scott. It's interdisciplinary in its approach and display. It's a cross-departmental presentation, about 250 works, all drawn from the permanent collection of the PMA. It explores the artistic production of the 1940s, the entire 1940s, I might add, and the inverse relationship between creativity and restriction. Boom surveys this tumultuous period and the innovative ideas that artists and designers brought to their work in all media, from fashion, textiles, craft, design, prints and drawings, photographs, painting, and sculpture. So I hope you'll come to the PMA, and I'll see you in our hallowed halls. And I think I'll either take questions if we have time, or we'll do the thing afterwards and we can all head to lunch. So thank you very much for your attention. There also is a publication associated with the show. We had a very limited time to pull this exhibition off. We had 11 months from the moment we were told to the minute it opened. And instead of doing a typical publication or catalog, we invited outside authors to write, like, for example, Ken Burns talks about his experience of doing his series on World War II. There's discussions of fashion and poetry of the period, things that we couldn't bring forward in the show. And its look is more like a fashion magazine from the period. So I'll leave it here for you to look at, but this is a gift for you, Lisa. So thank you. Thank you very much.